This week's message has been something that's kind of been on my heart and on my mind all week long. And it started early this week when it was brought to my attention that one of the people in our district at work has put out the announcement that he has different pronouns. That he is supposed to be addressed in a certain way, which might not be consistent with his appearance. And folks, I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I told my boss, I said, I won't do that. I can't. I can't. I'm not going to refer to someone as they, them. I don't care. That's ridiculous. That's asking too much of me. And my boss is right on the same page with me. And he said, Jeff, I hope it doesn't get to the point to where they force us to do that. And I said, if they tell me I have to refer to somebody by their chosen pronouns, then I'm going to come up with my own chosen pronoun. And he said, what's that? And I said, His, Your Majesty. That's what I would prefer. Just refer to me from now on as Your Majesty. Or His Royal Highness, that could work. Your Royal Highness. Why couldn't I? I mean, why couldn't I do that? It doesn't make sense to me. If someone who is quite obviously a dude wants to be called she, how is it that it's a problem for me if I say, well, from now on, please just refer to me as Your Royal Highness? I don't see how either one could be a problem because both are delusional. And you know what? What's happening in our world today is it's becoming a situation where it is the simplest things that are causing the biggest turmoil. Right now in Canada, our neighbors to the north are going through quite a little mess because they want to retain the simple right to say, I'll take this shot or not. How difficult is that? I mean, how hard is what we're talking about here? I listened to a conservative, patriot type pundit last week, and he was talking about this big, I don't know if you want to call it a concert or whatever. He's doing a big speech, speechifying, if you will, for a large crowd. And he said, if you come to this, they initially said, if you come to this, you have to have a vaccine card. And he said, that's none of my business. But if you want to come and sit down in this auditorium with 15,000 people, I'm going to ask that you take a rapid COVID test coming in the door. That might be more than I would be willing to do. I mean, the idea of walking up to a door so somebody could stick something up my nose, there's just something that doesn't work there with me. But by the same token, I can understand how you would not want to have 15,000 people in an auditorium and 5 of them have a raging infection that they're spreading to other people. That kind of makes sense. But and this is what always happens. You take something that seems like maybe, well, I can see how you get there, and then they pile on, and they pile on. 1 Corinthians 1:27, Paul writes this, and this isn't our text today, but I think it's illuminative. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. Folks, there are people out there who have a doctorate and don't know the difference between a boy and a girl. My goodness, This is something we learned on the farm at a very early age. There are people out there who don't understand it's not your right to tell someone else what kind of medicine they have to take, or if they have to take medicine at all. That's not your right. It's the foolish things, it seems, the simplest things that confound us now. Now, I want to look at how this affects us and how it affects Christians. So if you would, please, turn with me to Galatians, the 6th chapter. Galatians, the 6th chapter. And from many things that Jesus said and many of the things that Jesus teaches, I believe that Paul walks away and he is confident in making this statement in Galatians 6 and verse 7, where he says this: "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." I'm afraid that Christians have forgotten the law of sowing and reaping. I think sometimes we forget that, and I think the world forgets it, and I think governments certainly forget it. Look what is happening in Canada right now. When you have people being attacked, when you have people being beaten, when you have people having their livelihoods taken away from them because of resistance, does the government realize what they sow, they are certainly going to reap? I didn't see any violence. Now, I am equally sure there's a knothead somewhere that did something stupid. But I'm telling you that from everything I've been able to see up there in Canada, it's kind of what you would imagine a Canadian protest to be. They've been firm and they've been causing trouble, but I haven't seen any violence. You don't see trash all over the streets. I have not yet seen one bit of video, and I think if they had it, we'd see it, of any of the protesters advancing on the law enforcement people. I haven't seen any of that. It's all been the other way. What do you think is going to happen, and what are those folks up there sowing right now? Because what they sow, they're going to reap. There's no two ways about it. This is a constant. This is an absolute. This is something that we understand from the various early beginnings. You don't need to have a doctorate in theology to understand this simple biblical concept. As a matter of fact, everything in life leads us to this. If you've never farmed, if you've never planted anything and watched it grow, I assume you were in elementary school at one point in time. Didn't everybody plant a bean in a Dixie cup in elementary school? I think we all did that, right? And then you watched the bean grow. When you planted the bean in the Dixie cup, did a palm tree grow? No, a bean grew. Why? Because that's what you planted. We understand this. Beth, how amazed would you be if you went out and you had your heifer bred and she gave birth to a little goat? That doesn't work that way, does it? And here again, it goes back to the simplest things, things we've understood from the very beginning. In Genesis 1:24, God said, in Genesis 1:24, God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind." According to its kind. Cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth, each according to its kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth according to its kind. Cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God saw that it was good, that if mommy camel and daddy camel love each other, you end up with what? A baby camel. It would not be good if mommy camel and daddy camel loved each other and you ended up with a donkey. You see, God said it would be good, and it is good that things reproduce according to their kind. Well, folks, I'll tell you, if the kind of fruit that you are bringing forth is bitterness, arrogance, violence, if the kind of fruit that you are bringing forth is turmoil and disgruntled arguments and things like this all the time, if this is your fruit, then what do you expect you're going to get? That's the very thing you're going to receive when that is what you plant. If we are going to be the kind of people that run around and violence is our first option, well, guess what you're going to get? You will surely get violence in return. We should, and American people always have been, the kind of people that said, you have to drag me to violence. That's how we should be. We should have to be dragged to the point of doing something that's any resistance at all. Even Thomas Jefferson, in writing the Declaration of Independence, said that, paraphrased, you know, people will generally suffer a whole lot before they'll actually rise up. He says, it's taken a lot to get us to this point. It has taken a lot to get us to this point. But I want to ask you, in our world today, in things that truly and really matter, have we not led the government to believe that they can do whatever they want to us? Well, we sure have. We sure have. We have let the government tell us, we're going to take this money out of your paycheck and there's nothing you can do about it. We have let the government tell us, we're going to tell you what you can drive, how you can drive, when you can drive. We've let them tell us that. We've let them tell us, we're going to tell you how and what you must educate your children with. We let them tell us that. Now, and in a sense, isn't it kind of unfair for us now all of a sudden to say, whoa, stop it? You know, we're going to have to take some time, and we're going to have to make sure that we've done everything we possibly can do to be in the right. Because what we sow, according to Paul here, what we sow is what we are going to reap. Don't be deceived. It's not going to be something different. Folks, we can even do what's necessary. We can even resist, and do so in such a way that we protect ourselves from this unbending law of sowing and reaping. This morning in Sunday school, I was talking about the words of Solomon. Solomon says there's a time to kill. Solomon says there's a time for war. Now we know that, don't we? We know that. Whether it's because Russia is invading the Ukraine, I don't know. But is there a time for war? Yeah. This country was born out of war. And frankly, we haven't been away from war for very long in this country's history ever. And some of those wars, if you will, some of those occasions when we were moved to fight, some of those things were good and noble and had to happen. Because, my friend, there is truly a time for war. But before we start saying we want to make war at our doorstep, I think we need to take a minute and ask ourselves, what does that look like? Now, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to talk to you about a time when our church sat down and we said, if everything goes south, what do we do? That was tough. We did some things that probably a lot of other churches don't do in response to that. We took some serious first aid training here. It's kind of gross. But we took some serious first aid training. We've taken some other measures to make sure that we have power if we need it by having a generator. We've taken some other steps. And then we started to store food. And the more I thought about it and the more I studied on it, I think it's a good idea to have some food here. But let me ask you a question. If we have food and no one else does, if we are not willing to protect that food, how long will we have it? The answer, boys and girls, is not very long. So let me ask you a question. Is it important enough for us to have food in this place? Is it important enough that bodies be stacked up outside these doors like cordwood of dead people? Is it that important? Whew. There's a time for war, but what does that look like? What does that look like? What are we going to have to do? Now I know and I intend to maintain autonomy over what shots I take and what shots I do not take. I intend to maintain autonomy over when I would like to wear a mask and when I don't want to wear a mask. I don't intend to give these things up. But I want to ask you, what does a war over a shot look like? What does a war over a mask look like? Now, I know that what we're talking about here is much bigger than a shot, and it's much bigger than a mask. We all know that. We all know that what happened 2 years ago in this country amounted to little more than the camel getting his nose under the tent. That's all it amounted to, and that's all it was. And I think that's all it was ever meant to be. But you know how this is going to look, and you know how we are going to be portrayed. So I ask you, what does war look like, and is it worth it? Do not be deceived. Listen to Paul, the strength of Paul's statement there. He says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Now, to understand that, I think we've got to go back to that Genesis passage again. This is how God intended that it be. God intended that if we are kind, we receive kindness in return. Does it always work that way? No. Because sadly, there's only one evil creature that God ever made, and that was us. So sometimes evil people will repay your kindness with evil. But generally speaking, folks, and I know that you know this is true, when we have been kind, we receive kindness in return. An evil person notwithstanding, a crazy maniac notwithstanding, Canada's Trudeau notwithstanding, kindness is generally repaid with kindness. Now we know that, and we need to do everything we can do to be kind. But there will and there may come a point where we say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But I can't be kind anymore. The founding of Canada and the founding of the United States is very different. I don't care what anybody tells you, the reason why the United States was founded was over taxation, something we seem to have become very comfortable with. I don't get that, but we have. And I don't care what anybody tells you, what kicked the war off was they came to take our guns and we shot them. That's basically how it comes to. I mean, if the Reader's Digest version of how the Revolutionary War started is right there. They taxed us. We did not want to pay those taxes. We felt that those taxes were usurious and unfair. We refused to pay them. They said, oh, no, you're going to pay them. We said, no, we really aren't. A little bit of tea became an environmental problem in the Boston Harbor. And the next thing you know, they decided to come and take our guns. And we said you can have the lead balls first. Now, that's how it all came down. It was important enough. And it was important enough, if for no other reason than that because of the work of the United States from the 1700s all the way into the 1940s and 1950s, because of the work of the United States, the gospel of Jesus Christ and the grace of God through Christ has spread all around the world. It was worth it, if for no other reason than for that reason. Now, what are we sowing today? Hatred, discontent. Oh my goodness. How many of you have seen, there's a commercial that's on TV right now, and of course it's Olympics time, right? So there are a lot of these Olympic commercials. How many of you have seen the commercial where there's a young black girl, and she's a speed skater, and she's standing at the starting line at one of these speed skating races, right? And she's standing there, and what she says in the commercial is that something that's given her problems and difficulties over the years is the fact that she's the only black person and all the other people don't look like her. Who's the racist? What if the white girls were all to have said, you know, the problem is we get that black chick down the middle of this thing? What would that have caused? Oh my goodness. The inner cities of America would be on fire. But this girl can say, I'm on the world stage. I have been shepherded and taken care of and trained to the point to where I am a world-class athlete. And when I go out there to do something that I may never have a chance to do again in my entire life, all I can see is 5 white girls. That's all I see. Who's the racist? Now, folks, there are things that are going on in our world today that make no sense. And frankly, they make us violent and they make us cranky because we've been told that we're racist for far too long. And most of us realize we're not racist. And what happens? We start to get angry. And frankly, it hurts. It hurts. But we have to be careful that when we get hurt, our aim isn't simply to hurt back. Folks, men, women, you married folks here, how many times have you said something to your spouse that you would love to take back, but they hurt you? And by golly, you hurt them back. Do you have things like that live in your mind where you go, oh my goodness, why did I even say that? Do you have things like that live in your mind where you say, I didn't need to do that, but it hurt me, so I had to hurt them back? In all of man's motivations, that may be the poorest of all. Because you've hurt me, I'll hurt you back. Folks, whatever it is that you're planting, expect to go back and find that at harvest time. What are you planting? Are you planting hate? Are you planting arrogance? Are you planting conceit? Are you planting anger and harm and hurtfulness? Is that what you're planting? Because when harvest time comes, guess what? You're going to harvest. And not only that, this law of sowing and reaping, it goes way beyond that. When I was a kid, I don't know why. I can't tell you why this was done or what the great purpose for it was, but it was always what Dad did, and I think I have half an idea why he did it. When we picked the last stuff off the garden, actually, when we finished things off, like when the potatoes were all dug, Dad would go through and sow turnips where the potatoes used to be. And then, when the corn was off, Dad would till it up and he'd sow turnips where the corn used to be. And by the end of the fall, we had turnips growing all over our garden. We had a big garden. Now, Dad loved turnips. I can eat a turnip every now and then, but really, I don't know. Dad loved turnips. He would eat turnips like apples. So part of it, I understand. But you know what? Because we had an acre and a half of garden, and because Dad had enough seed to cover an acre and a half of garden, we always had way more turnips than we were ever going to use. Why? We put out a lot of seed. If you put out a lot of seed, then you're going to get a big crop. If you don't put out much seed, you're not going to get much of a crop. There again, in 2 Corinthians, Paul writes this, "But this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully." So not only is it important what we sow, it's important how much of it. How much of it. Folks, what the world needs from us is honesty, compassion, kindness, consideration, humility. This is what the world needs from us. And they need that we sow a lot. This is something that we need to be sowing in abundance. This is something that we need to be spreading everywhere. Kindness, grace, consideration, helpfulness, tenderness, forgiveness, humility. Sadly, we don't do that much. I meet a lot of people these days that when you meet them, they feel compelled to tell you what they have a degree in. And the same thing goes through my mind every time. Somebody will come up and they'll stick their hand out to me and they'll go, "Hi, my name's John Doe, PE." And I go, "Hi, my name's Jeff," and I don't care. Because I don't. I don't care. What I care about is, what is John Doe there to do? Is he there to help? Is he there to make things better? Is he there to make sure that we're spending tax dollars the way they should be spent? Is he there to make sure that we're protecting resources and we're protecting people? Or is he there so that he can go to the next big meeting of all the other PEs and tell them all what he's done? Because if that's what he's there for, I have no inclination to help him. Well, folks, when we go up to the people of the world and we tell them how long we've been in Christ, and we tell them all we know, and we tell them, "Oh my goodness, I studied this and this and this and this, and I've done all of these things, and this is what I've done, and that is what I've done, and this is how great my life is, and this is how good a Christian I am," and when we tell them all that stuff, I don't think they care at all. You know what the world wants to see from us? Do you know what the fallen Christian needs to see from us? They need for us to sow compassion and kindness and forgiveness and forgetfulness in their direction. That's what they need from us. Sometimes what they need may not be what they want. And folks, I feel bad. I feel bad in lots of different ways, and I feel conflicted in many different ways. I feel bad that when I took a look at what the school systems were like, I took my kids out. I didn't let them go there. On the one hand, I protected my children, and I'm glad. I'm glad because my kids took some amazing things away from the Delaware Christian School, most notably the lovely Haley, that my oldest son took away from Delaware Christian School. They took some great stuff away. But you know what? Highland High School was deprived of something. It turned out I did the math. And I said, well, would I be willing to go in there every day and fight? Yes, I would. But would I be willing to risk my children? No, I wouldn't. Folks, we got to pay some attention to what's going on. We have to pay serious attention to what's going on. We have to pay attention and know that there comes a point when this government and the people around us need to hear us clearly and with great humility say to them, no. You've asked me to do something I cannot do. They need to hear that. We owe them that. And here again, folks, I'm going to tell you, they needed to hear no in 1973 when they decided it was okay to shred babies in the womb. They needed to hear no from us. But we didn't say anything. They needed to hear no when in the state of Ohio we voted overwhelmingly that marriage be between one man and one woman, and the General Assembly overturned it. They needed to hear no from us. They needed to hear no firmly, yet gently, no. But we didn't. They've needed to hear no from us I don't know how many times. They need to hear no from us when a highway patrolman can pull you over just to check you out. Have they never heard of the Fourth Amendment? They need to hear no from us. But we haven't. We haven't said no. So now, when we are about to, and I think many of us have gotten to the point to where we are willing to say no, we need to make sure that we are being extra patient, extra careful, and extra gentle in the way that we firmly say no. Now, where do we go from here? Pay attention. What you sow, you're going to reap. Over the past few decades, we have sown copious amounts of, okay. We have sown crazy amounts of compromise. Well, what grew from it? Exactly what you would expect. So now it's time for us to sow something a little different. Now it's time for us to sow a nice, kind, gentle, respectful no. And mean it. Folks, it doesn't matter what you sow if the seed's no good. Now, in your life, the seed has to be good. Don't tell me how much you are concerned about the church. Don't tell me how much you are concerned about the lost. Don't tell me how much you are concerned about people hearing the gospel if you're not willing to do anything. Faith without works is quite literally and very much dead. Now, if all you're going to do is talk about it and all you're going to do is gripe about it, then save your breath. It is time for us to decide what we need to do and stand up and do it. And for the Christian, this is an everyday exhausting exercise because every day we must sow compassion. We must sow kindness. We must sow the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. These are the things we must sow, and we have to do it every day. And it is about time that we sow bountifully. I'm not apocalyptic. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm just not. Today's the anniversary of Rush Limbaugh's passing. And I've told folks before that Did I agree with everything Rush said? No. Do I think Rush was deity? Obviously not. He died. I don't think any of that stuff. But one of the things that I loved about Rush Limbaugh's program is he always ended it on a high note with optimism. He always ended even his most dire warnings with this: the American people are people who overcome. We overcome circumstances. There was a time in the 1700s when American people faced the most powerful army on the face of the planet that the world had ever known, and we overcome those circumstances. And many different things down through the line we have overcome. 1918, we had this horrible flu. We had no vaccine and precious few masks. Killed a million of our American compatriots and friends and neighbors and family. Killed 1 million of them in a year. Our population was way lower then than it is now. We got through it. We got through it. Look at our healthcare system. Stuff that killed people 50 years ago is an outpatient procedure today. Look at what we have done. We are a people unique in all the world in that we overcome things. We don't get crushed under them. We overcome them. Now, this government has gotten out of hand. They want to tell us what we can do with this book. They want to tell us when we have to lock those doors. They want to tell us what we have to put in our bodies and what we have to wear on our faces. They've taken things a little too far. It's time for us, once again, to overcome. And I think we can do it. I don't cotton to the notion that it's always going to get worse. I would like to see us turn this around long enough for that little boy right there to have an amazing life. I'd like to see us turn things around long enough to where he can trot his grandchildren on his knee in a free country, in the land of plenty. I'd like to imagine that one of my grandchildren stands up one day in the pulpit and says, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by him. That's my hope. And I'm not willing to imagine that it can't be just so. What you sow, you shall reap. If pessimism grew like dandelions, how much would be around your place? If optimism and good thoughts and the best of intentions and kindness and hope and humility grew around your place like dandelions. I remember when I was a kid, I didn't know dandelions were a bad thing, Rod. I didn't. I had no idea. And then the commercials started to come on TV about stuff for your lawn to kill the dandelions. And I looked at Dad and I said, why would we want to kill the dandelions, Dad? Dad goes, I don't know. We get dandelion greens off of them. Dandelion greens are good. And if we killed all the dandelions in our front yard, we wouldn't have no front yard. I didn't know there was anything wrong with them. And here I find out there's this vast conspiracy to kill them. Somebody constantly waiting to kill them, to jerk them up by the roots, to poison them to death. I didn't even know. Oh, I think having a bunch of beautiful dandelions around you that represent all the good things, all the decent things, all the kind things that you have sown. That wouldn't be a bad deal. I would say roses, but I bought Sharon roses last Sunday, and my goodness, those things are expensive. You can't afford to be surrounded by them. So let's go with dandelions. Maybe the occasional violet. Those ditch lilies I love to see in the spring and summer. Something beautiful to represent the beautiful things that we have done. And folks, there's nothing more beautiful than patience. There's nothing more beautiful than hope. There's nothing more beautiful than kindness. There's nothing more beautiful than humility. And there's nothing more beautiful than the willingness of His own children to share the message of the gospel. God's love story with man to those who desperately need to hear it. This we should do bountifully. What have you sown? Here's something I know. In your heart of hearts, in that really deep part of you that maybe you don't even notice until it's a Thursday evening and you can't sleep. In your heart of hearts, you know whether you have been obedient to God, whether you have sown obedience and faith and trust that you might reap His salvation. You know what's growing there in your heart. Today I'll invite you to make a change. In a minute we're going to stand and sing our invitation hymn, which is page 669, Christ for the World We Sing. But before we do, let's pray together. Father, open our eyes to see the crop that we have sown that many of us now see as ready for the harvest. Let us see that we might know in the future just how careful we must be. Father, I pray that there might be one here today who has taken an assessment of what grows in his or her field and has decided there's more I need to do. There's more that stands before me because on the other side, my God waits with His arms wide open. Father, help us today to see our own predicament, that we might need to change some things, and those things we'd change. That we might need to add things to what we're doing, and those things we'll add. Father, maybe we see in our own heart and life that we've been sowing sparingly where we ought to be sowing bountifully. And Father, then we might know what it is to take in your harvest, the harvest that you have blessed and brought to us. Father, I just pray that you would open our hearts to see you and to know what is there and what is contained therein. And Father, I pray that you would help us today to mind you and to do what it is that you would have us to do. In Jesus' holy name, I pray. Amen.